There was a time when a Mercedes-Benz was not bought. It was chosen, carefully, quietly, often once in a lifetime. These were cars built when engineers were allowed to overbuild, when steel was thick, tolerances were tight, and the idea of replacing a vehicle every few years felt absurd. People trusted these cars not because of advertising, but because they saw them still running decades later, unchanged, unbothered by time. Old Mercedes were not fast. They were not flashy. They simply endured. But endurance does not mean immunity. Today, those same cars sit in garages and driveways like museum pieces, still expected to function as daily transportation. Owners believe they are safe because the cars still run, because they have already outlived everything else. What most do not see is that the world around these cars has changed in ways they were never designed to survive. Regulations no longer ask how well a car is built. They ask what data it can provide, what systems it can interface with, and what liabilities it represents on modern roads. Quiet deadlines are forming. Registration systems are digitizing. Insurance algorithms are tightening. Parts networks are vanishing. And buried within this list is one Mercedes, so legendary that owners assume it will always be protected. When the next wave of enforcement arrives, that assumption may leave them with no legal path forward at all. These cars were built to last forever. The world they were built for was not. Number 15. Mercedes-Benz W123. The Mercedes-Benz W123 is often spoken about with a kind of reverence that borders on mythology. It was the car people bought when they wanted certainty, not excitement, not innovation, certainty. Taxi operators trusted it because downtime meant lost income, and the W123 almost never stopped. Government offices trusted it because it projected seriousness and restraint. Families trusted it because it never surprised them with sudden failures. In many parts of the world, especially Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, the W123 became more than transportation. It became infrastructure, a machine expected to function indefinitely, regardless of climate, fuel quality, or neglect. The diesel versions cemented that reputation. Engines designed to run under stress, often producing modest power but extraordinary longevity. Mechanical fuel injection systems that could tolerate contamination. Cooling systems that seemed impossible to overwhelm. Owners didn't talk about horsepower or features. They talked about mileage. 400,000, 600,000, a million kilometers. The W123 didn't age the way other cars did. It simply accumulated history. That history is now part of the problem. The W123 was engineered in an era when durability was measured in metal thickness and mechanical tolerance, not in data output or regulatory compatibility. Its emission systems were designed to meet standards that relied on static testing and visual inspection. Modern enforcement no longer works that way. Cities and states are shifting toward algorithm-based emissions modeling, roadside sensors, and automated compliance checks. These systems do not ask how clean a car is relative to its age. They ask whether it meets a current threshold. The W123 does not because it is malfunctioning, but because it was never designed to communicate compliance in the first place. Insurance companies are responding in parallel. The W123 lacks modern crash mitigation, modern restraint systems, and standardized replacement parts. As a result, many insurers now classify it as a non-standard or specialty risk. That classification brings higher premiums, reduced coverage, or outright refusal, especially in urban environments. Owners often discover this only at renewal, when a policy they've had for years is suddenly unavailable. Parts availability compounds the issue. While the engine may run indefinitely, brake components, suspension parts, and safety-related systems are increasingly sourced from limited suppliers or collectors. Costs rise sharply. A repair that once took an afternoon now takes weeks and thousands of dollars. Registration systems are tightening as well. In regions where inspections have moved fully digital, the W123 falls into a regulatory gap. Too old to interface, too common to qualify for blanket exemption. Some jurisdictions already require emissions documentation or safety verification that the car cannot provide, regardless of condition. Owners arrive for renewal expecting a routine process and leave with a temporary permit or a denial, confused because nothing is actually wrong with the car. That is what makes the W123 situation so unsettling. It does not fail dramatically. There is no breakdown, no warning light, no final drive. It continues to start every morning, idle smoothly, and cruise comfortably, all while becoming increasingly incompatible with the systems that decide whether it is allowed to exist on public roads. For owners who believed longevity was protection, the realization comes late and without ceremony. The W123 was built to last forever. It just wasn't built for this future. Number 14. Mercedes-Benz W124. The Mercedes-Benz W124 is widely regarded as the last car Mercedes built without compromise. It came from an era when engineers, not accountants, had the final say. Buyers trusted it instinctively. Professionals chose it because it projected competence without excess. Families chose it because it felt permanent. Taxi fleets chose it because it refused to quit. The W124 didn't chase trends. It set a standard and then quietly exceeded it. Doors shut with weight. Switches moved with resistance. Engines were engineered to operate well below their limits. Owners didn't talk about whether it would last. They assumed it would. That assumption is now being tested by systems the W124 was never meant to face. The car sits in a dangerous middle generation. It is no longer old enough to be universally classified as a historic vehicle, yet it is too old to comply with modern digital inspection and diagnostic frameworks. Early electronic systems in the W124 were groundbreaking for their time, but they were never designed to communicate with today's standardized emissions and safety database. As inspection regimes transition fully into digital verification, these cars are increasingly flagged not for failing tests, but for being unreadable. The system does not see a compliant vehicle. It sees an unknown variable. Parts scarcity compounds the risk. While the mechanical components often remain robust, electronic modules do not age as gracefully. Climate control units, ABS modules, early engine control computers, and wiring harnesses are becoming difficult to source in reliable condition. When one of these components fails, the repair cost can exceed the car's market value overnight. Owners are forced into a decision they never anticipated: invest heavily in a vehicle that still drives perfectly, or walk away from a machine they believed was immune to obsolescence. Number 13. Mercedes-Benz W201 190e. The Mercedes-Benz 190e was never meant to be legendary. It was meant to be precise, compact, disciplined, and meticulously engineered. It was Mercedes' response to buyers who wanted quality without excess. Young professionals bought it as their first serious car. Enthusiasts respected it for its balance and handling. Engineers admired it because nothing about it was accidental. It felt tight, controlled, and deliberately overbuilt for its size. Owners trusted it because it behaved the same way year after year, without drama. Modern safety and insurance models do not reward that kind of consistency. The W201's compact dimensions and rigid construction place it at a disadvantage in contemporary crash compatibility simulations. These models are not based on build quality or maintenance. They are based on physics. Against modern SUVs and trucks, the 190e absorbs less energy and transfers more force to occupants. Insurers understand this, and their response is mathematical, not emotional. Premiums rise, coverage options narrow. In some regions, comprehensive insurance is no longer offered at all. Owners are told the car is too small, too old, and too risky, regardless of its condition. Urban regulations intensify the pressure. Many cities are restructuring access rules based on a combination of emissions, safety ratings, and vehicle class. The 190e falls short across multiple categories through no fault of its own. It lacks modern impact mitigation systems. It lacks real-time emissions data. It lacks the digital interfaces regulators increasingly require. The result is not a ban, but a slow exclusion, higher fees, limited access, increasing scrutiny. For owners, the consequences are personal and immediate. Resale markets shrink because buyers understand the insurance and registration challenge. Daily driving becomes a calculation rather than a pleasure. One accident, even a minor one, can result in total loss, not because the car is destroyed, but because liability exposure is too high. The 190e still delivers everything it always did behind the wheel, but outside the cabin, the systems that govern legality and risk have already decided it belongs to another time. Insurance companies are adapting faster than most owners realize. Many now categorize the W124 as an unverifiable liability, particularly in dense urban areas. Coverage limits shrink, premiums rise, comprehensive policies quietly disappear. The car has not become unsafe. The environment around it has simply moved on. The W124 still feels like it could last another 30 years. The question is whether the world will let it. Number 12. Mercedes-Benz W126. The Mercedes-Benz W126 S-Class was once considered the safest car in the world. Buyers trust it because governments trusted it. Heads of state rode in them. Executives crossed continents in them. Engineers treated safety not as a feature, but as a mission. The W126 introduced crumple zones refined through real-world data, advanced restraint systems, and a level of structural integrity that set benchmarks other manufacturers chased for decades. To own one was to believe you were protected by the best thinking of its time. What time has done is reverse the equation. The Do-126's greatest strength, its mass and rigidity, now places it under growing scrutiny. Modern regulatory frameworks increasingly evaluate vehicles not just on occupant protection, but on how they interact with everything else on the road. Pedestrian safety modeling, infrastructure wear calculations, and impact energy transfer all penalize heavy vehicles with outdated safety geometry. Urban environments respond with higher tolls, restricted access, and parking limitations based on weight and emissions class. The Do-126 cannot adapt. Its design is fixed in another era. Insurance companies have adjusted quietly. Aging airbags and seatbelt pretensioners were never designed for modern deployment standards, and replacements are no longer manufactured. If one fails or deploys incorrectly, liability shifts toward the owner. Premiums rise not because of accident frequency, but because of injury severity projection. Resale markets feel the pressure. Buyers who once sought these cars for their perceived safety now hesitate, understanding that modern systems no longer see the Do-126 as protective, but as incompatible. It still feels invincible from behind the wheel. Outside that perspective, it is increasingly treated as an artifact rather than a solution. Number 11. Mercedes-Benz W116. The Do-116 holds a special place in Mercedes history as the first car to officially wear the S-Class name. Buyers trust it because it represented a turning point, a moment when safety, engineering, and prestige were fused into a single philosophy. Anti-lock braking, advanced structural design, and unprecedented attention to occupant protection made the Do-116 feel untouchable in its time. Owners believed that level of foresight would always shield it from irrelevance. The problem is that foresight had limits. The Do-116 exists entirely outside the digital framework that now governs vehicle legality. It provides no electronic emissions data, no diagnostic interface, and no standardized safety verification. As registration and inspection systems become automated, vehicles like the Do-116 are treated as exceptions, and exceptions are increasingly seen as risks. Some jurisdictions already require manual inspections with additional fees, special permits, or usage restrictions. Others are moving toward eliminating manual processes entirely. Insurance companies see a different problem. Without modern restraint systems and standardized crash data, fault and liability become more expensive to resolve. As a result, the Do-116 is often classified as a manual liability vehicle. One accident, regardless of fault, can expose the owner to significant financial risk. Parts scarcity magnifies the issue. Brake components, suspension parts, and safety-critical systems require specialized sourcing or custom fabrication. One failure can immobilize the car indefinitely. The Do-116 does not age visibly. It ages administratively, one form and one renewal at a time. Number 10. Mercedes-Benz W210. The Do-210 E-Class arrived as a bridge between tradition and modernity. Buyers trusted it because it carried forward the E-Class reputation while introducing contemporary comfort and technology. Families embraced it as a safe, sensible upgrade. Fleet operators relied on it for durability and efficiency. It felt modern without feeling fragile, and for many owners, it represented the perfect balance. The hidden threat was structural corrosion. Early Do-210 models suffer from rust in critical areas that are not easily visible during casual inspection. Subframes, suspension mounting points, and structural seams can degrade quietly over time. Regulators have taken notice. In regions where vehicle inspections now include structural integrity verification, Do-210s are increasingly failing certification. Once flagged, registration can be suspended until repairs are documented and approved. Those repairs often cost more than the car is worth. Insurance companies anticipate this risk. Many now limit coverage or increase deductibles specifically for corrosion-prone models. Claims related to structural failure are frequently denied. Resale values have collapsed as buyers understand the inspection and repair burden. Owners often discover the problem only when an inspection fails or a mechanic refuses to certify the car. The Do-210 does not announce its decline. It reveals it at the worst possible moment, when the cost of compliance becomes impossible to justify. Number 9. Mercedes-Benz W140. The Mercedes-Benz W140 was never meant to be subtle. It was engineered during a period when Mercedes believed excess was a form of safety. More steel meant more protection. More systems meant more control. Buyers trusted it because nothing else on the road felt as solid, as deliberate, or as indestructible. Heads of state, diplomats, and industrial leaders chose the W140 because it projected authority and permanence. When the doors closed, the outside world disappeared. That feeling convinced owners this was a car that would outlast trends, regulations, and even time itself. That confidence is now colliding with reality. The DO 140's size and complexity are its quiet liabilities, weighing significantly more than modern sedans and SUVs. It sits in a regulatory gray zone where weight-based emissions penalty, congestion charges, and urban access restrictions are becoming more common. Cities are redesigning traffic systems around efficiency and environmental impact, not presence. The DO 140 fails those metrics automatically. It consumes more fuel, produces higher emissions, and transfers more kinetic energy in collisions. Even when perfectly maintained, it triggers algorithmic red flags simply by existing. The mechanical and electronic complexity compounds the issue. Early digital systems, soft-close mechanisms, vacuum-operated accessories, and aging wiring harnesses were advanced for their time but are now fragile and expensive liabilities. Manufacturers no longer support most components. Repairs require specialist knowledge, custom fabrication, or donor vehicles. Insurance companies factor this into loss calculations. A minor accident that would be repairable on a modern car is often declared a total loss on a DO 140 due to parts scarcity and labor cost. Owners are left with diminished payouts and an unusable vehicle. Resale values reflect this shift brutally. Buyers admire the DO 140 from a distance but hesitate to commit. Registration authorities in some regions now require enhanced inspection due to the vehicle's mass and age, adding recurring costs and delays. The DO 140 still feels invincible behind the wheel, but outside that cocoon, it is increasingly treated as an anomaly that systems are designed to phase out, not preserve. There is no single failure point, just a slow tightening of conditions that make ownership harder every year. Number 8. Mercedes-Benz DO 124. The Mercedes-Benz DO 124 is often described as the last over-engineered Mercedes. Buyers trusted it because it earned that reputation honestly. Engineers designed it with margins so wide they seemed unnecessary, suspensions that absorbed punishment for decades, engines that ran calmly at speeds other cars struggled to reach. Taxi fleets, professionals, and families alike chose the DO 124 because it promised stability. It wasn't exciting, it was dependable, and for a long time, that was enough. The overlooked issue is that over-engineering does not equal regulatory immunity. The DO 124 straddles a dangerous middle ground. It is too old to meet modern emissions and safety expectations, yet too common to qualify for broad historic exemptions. Many models lack advanced catalytic systems, onboard diagnostics, or electronic emissions verification. As inspection regimes shift toward automated testing and real-time emissions monitoring, the DO 124 increasingly fails compliance without actually malfunctioning. Owners are told to fix problems that cannot be fixed without fundamentally altering the car. Insurance responses have followed a similar path. Aging safety systems, including early airbags and seatbelt mechanisms, present unpredictable risk profiles. Replacement parts are limited or no longer certified. If an accident occurs, liability assessments become complex and expensive. Premiums rise quietly, or coverage is restricted to basic liability only. In some regions, insurers now require independent inspections before issuing or renewing policies. Financial consequences escalate quickly. Suspension rebuilds, emissions retrofits, and compliance-related repairs can exceed the market value of the vehicle. Resale prices suffer as buyers factor in inspection uncertainty and future restriction. Owners who believe the DO 124's legendary reliability would protect them are discovering that reliability is no longer the deciding factor. The car still runs flawlessly. The systems that govern whether it is allowed on the road no longer care. Number 7. Mercedes-Benz DO 201 190e. 190e. The Mercedes-Benz DO 201, better known as the 190e, was the car that convinced an entire generation that smaller did not mean weaker. Buyers trusted it because it carried the same engineering philosophy as larger Mercedes models, but in a more accessible, more efficient form. Young professionals bought it as their first serious car. Fleet operators trusted it for durability. Enthusiasts admired its balance and composure. It was marketed as compact, but it never felt compromised. For many owners, the 190e represented the perfect lifelong vehicle. What few anticipated was how exposed that middle ground positioning would become. The DO 201 lacks the emissions flexibility of later models and the exemption status of true classic. Early catalytic converters, mechanical fuel injection system, and minimal onboard diagnostics place it at odds with modern emissions enforcement. As inspection systems move away from visual checks and towards sensor-based validation, the 190E increasingly fails compliance even when running perfectly. The issue is not pollution levels alone, but the inability to digitally verify them. That distinction matters to regulators, and it works against the car. Insurance companies view the DO 201 as a statistical outlier. Its age, combined with limited modern safety systems, increases projected injury costs despite its solid construction. Many insurers now restrict comprehensive coverage or impose higher deductibles. Accident repairs introduce another problem. Parts that once defined Mercedes quality are either discontinued or sourced through specialty channels at premium prices. A minor collision can result in repair estimates that exceed the vehicle's insured value. For owners, the consequences arrive quietly. Registration renewals become conditional. Insurance policies change terms without warning. Resale markets soften as buyers understand the compliance risks. The 190E still feels tight, precise, and dependable, but every year, the gap between how it drives and how it is classified grows wider, and there is no modification that fully closes that gap. Number 6. Mercedes-Benz W163 First Generation ML Class. The first generation ML Class was Mercedes' answer to a changing world. Buyers trusted it because it promised luxury with utility, prestige with practicality. Families embraced it as a safe, all-weather vehicle. Early SUV adopters saw it as proof that Mercedes could dominate a new segment. It sold in massive numbers, reinforcing the belief that it was a safe, long-term investment. The hidden problem lies in how quickly standards evolved around it. The W163 was engineered before modern SUV regulations fully matured. Early stability control system, rollover mitigation, and crash compatibility standards were still developing. As a result, the vehicle now scores poorly under contemporary safety modeling, particularly in rollover risk and side impact scenarios. Regulators have responded by applying stricter inspection criteria and, in some regions, usage restrictions for older SUVs in dense urban areas. Mechanical issues compound the risk. Transmission failures, electrical faults, and drivetrain wear are common as mileage accumulates. Repair costs escalate quickly, often surpassing the vehicle's resale value. Insurance companies factor these trends into coverage decisions. Many policies now exclude certain drivetrain failures or require inspections before renewal. Some insurers refuse comprehensive coverage entirely. The financial impact is severe. Resale values have collapsed. Owners who attempt to sell often discover buyers factoring in inspection failures, safety concerns, and repair uncertainty. Registration becomes harder in jurisdictions tightening SUV-specific rules. The W163 still looks capable. It still drives comfortably, but ownership increasingly feels like managing risk rather than enjoying reliability. Number 5. Mercedes-Benz G-Class Early Civilian Model. The early civilian G-Class was never meant to be common. Buyers trusted it because it was derived from military hardware, engineered for endurance rather than comfort. It projected invincibility. Owners believed its simple construction and legendary durability would protect it from obsolescence. For decades, that belief was justified. The G-Class survived trends that erased other vehicles entirely. Now, that very toughness has become its liability. Early G-Class models are heavy, inefficient, and mechanically blunt by modern standards. Emissions output, fuel consumption, and noise levels far exceed current expectations. As regulators tighten restrictions on high-output, low-efficiency vehicles, older G-Class models draw disproportionate attention. Some regions already impose usage limitations, emissions surcharges, or registration barriers based on weight and output alone. Insurance companies treat these vehicles cautiously. Crash dynamics are unfavorable compared to modern designs, especially in pedestrian impact scenarios. Replacement body panels, frames, and driveline components are expensive and increasingly rare. In the event of an accident, repair costs can exceed the vehicle's insured value, triggering total loss classification even for repairable damage. Owners face an uncomfortable truth. The G-Class remains mechanically capable, but legally vulnerable. Modifying it to meet modern standards often undermines its value and authenticity. Leaving it stock exposes it to increasing restriction. There is no neutral position. What was once seen as indestructible is now seen as incompatible, and the systems making that judgment do not negotiate. Number 4. Mercedes-Benz W211 E-Class. The Mercedes-Benz DU211 arrived with the promise of refinement without compromise. Buyers trusted it because it looked like the natural evolution of everything the E-Class had always stood for: comfortable, technically advanced, safe. It was marketed as intelligent luxury, packed with electronics that made driving feel easier, smoother, and more controlled. Professionals chose it as a daily workhorse. Families relied on it for long-distance travel. At the time, it felt future-proof. That future arrived faster than the car was prepared for. The DU211 is defined by its dependence on early-generation electronic systems. SBC brake-by-wire technology, adaptive suspension, complex steering modules, and network control units were revolutionary, but they were never designed for decades of service. As these systems age, failures become not just possible, but inevitable. Regulators and inspection agencies now pay closer attention to electronic fault histories, not just mechanical condition. A single unresolved fault code can trigger inspection failure or conditional registration. Manufacturers have quietly stepped back. Many critical components are discontinued or only available as refurbished units with limited warranties. When systems like SBC braking fail, repairs can cost more than the vehicle's market value. Insurance companies understand this risk. Comprehensive coverage is increasingly restricted. Some insurers classify DU211s with certain options as high risk due to sudden electronic failure potential. Claims involving brake or suspension systems are scrutinized aggressively. For owners, the consequences are immediate and personal. A warning message on the dashboard can translate into thousands of dollars in repairs or the inability to renew registration. Resale markets punish uncertainty. Buyers know the reputation. The DU211 still feels advanced when it works. When it doesn't, there is no gradual decline, just a hard stop enforced by systems that no longer tolerate experimental technology from another era. Number 3. Mercedes-Benz DU220 S-Class. The DU220 S-Class was built to redefine modern luxury. Buyers trusted it because it was lighter, faster, and more technologically ambitious than any S-Class before it. It introduced adaptive air suspension, advanced electronic stability systems, and a level of digital integration that felt years ahead of competitors. Executives, diplomats, and luxury buyers believed they were purchasing the safest and most sophisticated sedan on the road. What they actually bought was a preview of long-term risk. The DU220's reliance on air suspension and interconnected electronic systems has become its defining vulnerability. Air struts fail, compressors burn out, control modules lose calibration. Regulators increasingly view suspension integrity as a safety issue, not a comfort one. Vehicles with active fault codes related to ride height or stability are flagged during inspection. Registration can be denied until repairs are completed. Those repairs are expensive, recurring, and unavoidable. Insurance companies respond accordingly. A failed air suspension component